Okay, so let's get going. Thank you everyone for joining us, ProDrive, today for our latest in the series of our productivity webinars. These webinars are designed to help you get more out of the functionality that you already pay for with your Microsoft 365 license. So today's webinar is making better use of SharePoint, and it's great to see so many of you on the webinar today. I'm expecting today's webinar to be about 25 minutes long, which will give us a little bit of time for some questions at the end. But as it's just me here today on the call, feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go along, and I'll try to answer them at the end. If we run out of time or I can't answer them, then I'll follow up with the answers after the webinar. So let me introduce myself. My name is Matt Taylor. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the technical director here at ProDrive IT. If you don't know ProDrive, we are a leading IT support provider based in Woking. And you can see there we have a strong focus on security, strategy, productivity for our clients. We tend to work with clients in legal, accounting, financial services, but not exclusively in those markets. And what I'll run through today with you is applicable to really anybody with a Microsoft 365 license, whatever type of company you work in. Some elements do require a Copilot license. We'll come on to that at the end. Excuse me. So what we're going to look at today is to take a look at how you can use SharePoint better in your organization. So most people just think of SharePoint as a replacement file server with a few cloudy features, but it's sort of much more than that, really. And I promise today isn't going to be just a bunch of PowerPoint slides. We're going to jump into a live demo so you can see some real world examples. Okay, so some quick background. So a lot of what you use in Microsoft 365 is built on SharePoint. It really does sort of sit at the heart of things. So whether you think you're using SharePoint right now or not, you probably are, even indirectly. So back when 365 was a new product, the focus on sort of data migrations was really all about emails, getting rid of the on-premise email servers and the expense and complexity that goes with them, for the convenience and the security of Microsoft's platform. And data soon followed suit, with people wanting to do more with it, to be able to share it externally, to do more than you could with a traditional on-premise file server. And so SharePoint has been around for quite a while as a piece of on-premise software. And you could install it on your own servers, but it was a complex beast to install and configure and maintain. So when the cloud version appeared, it quickly became popular as technical teams could offload all of that configure maintenance to Microsoft and focus on delivering productivity value to their teams instead. So one point that does crop up sort of quite a lot is SharePoint versus OneDrive. So I've seen a few companies think they're using SharePoint when in reality they're using OneDrive, and admittedly it's easy to get the two confused, as they can sort of look and feel quite similar when using them. SharePoint is where you should be storing all of your company data, so sort of an honorable mention to Teams, as that's sort of come in and can also be used for that. But Teams is itself built on SharePoint. OneDrive is where you'd put all your personal but still work related files, so not your actual personal data, not photos of Fluffy the dog or anything. That's on your home computer or your home sort of personal cloud file service. But the kind of documents that not everyone else in the office needs access to. So perhaps it's a spreadsheet you've created to help you work out whether the payroll team calculated your pay correctly. Maybe you need a place to store a letter of complaint about your work colleague that keeps stealing your milk. So whatever it is, it's your personal space. That's OneDrive. You can still share files and folders from OneDrive, and that's usually what sort of triggers the confusion. But the key point is the last one here on this slide, that the permissions on those shared items can't be managed centrally. So it's not suited to being used as the main document storage platform for a business. That is where SharePoint comes in. So quick sort of architecture. This isn't intended to be a sort of technical too technical webinar, but sites versus libraries. So while SharePoint is a platform that you can customize sort of pretty endlessly, a great deal of people simply use SharePoint as a replacement for an on-premise file server. And when you're doing that, you're talking about this hierarchy with things called sites and document libraries. So document libraries are akin to the sort of shared folders, top-level shared folders you would have created on a file server. A site is the object that holds those within the whole sort of structure of SharePoint. And above that, you've got your organizational level. Not going to dig too deeply into the structure, but sites and document libraries are both terms that will crop up throughout this webinar. So I thought it worth touching on briefly. So now that we've worked out that we should be using SharePoint, how do we make sure that our data is safe and we're sharing it in a manner that's appropriate for our business? So your first port of call here is the SharePoint Admin Center. You may or may not have access to it depending on your rights that you've been given at your business, but you can ask your IT department or your IT company to do this. But this is where you can set your sharing settings at an organizational or company level. So you can see here, this is just a screen grab from it, that you have options ranging from most permissive, so sharing with anybody at the top, you can see there, down to the least permissive, which doesn't allow any external sharing. And note that you have separate settings for SharePoint and OneDrive. So the key here is that whatever you set here will effectively override any settings on SharePoint sites which sit below the organization in a hierarchy as per the previous slide. So if you chose to block all external sharing, perhaps that's what your business required, you can move the slide all the way down to the bottom. That would override whatever you had set on a per site level. Excuse me. Your SharePoint sites can be set at any level up to and including the level that's set here, but they cannot exceed it to be more permissive. So it's quite important. This setting really keeps a lid on what you're allowing people to do. You can sort of think of it like a big on-off switch. If you wanted to prevent external sharing of data entirely, this is where you would go to turn it off and be sure that it's turned off. So below that, we have some other sort of more granular options that you might want to switch on or off depending on your use case. You can limit it to a particular domain. There's no one size fits all here. Just be aware of the options and configure them as appropriate for your business. So if we take a look at the below that in the Admin Center, there are some options for managing file and folder links. So you can set the defaults for the type of links that are created. So do you want to allow people to just view documents or edit them as well? And we'll see that in action in a bit. So best practices here, really. So what we would recommend is that you block sharing at the site level for internal document libraries. So we suggest creating separate sites for internal documents, only ever going to be used internally, and a separate site for documents that you might want to share externally or that you need to share externally. And you always assign permissions to groups. That's a general sort of best practice thing. So you'd want to look at creating groups for perhaps the finance department, perhaps the marketing department, put your people into the groups and then assign the permissions to the groups. Be aware, depending on how, who's doing the admin for your business within 365, if you create a 365 group for finance, marketing, whoever, that will create them a SharePoint site and a team site and lots of other sort of bits in the background as well. So there is some sort of automation on the creation of these things, a bit beyond the scope of this webinar to go through today. We recommend securing your data using conditional access policies and app protection policies. It does require sort of a certain level of license within 365, but make sure that they're in place and really does sort of control the access. And the piece that we're going to get onto in a moment is enrich your data with metadata. So another recommendation, don't end up like this poor chap here who has decided he's going to move all his data to SharePoint, and he's struggling because he hasn't done any sort of tidy up on it beforehand. So it's key that if you are going to move data into SharePoint, don't just lift and shift everything you've got, everything that you've accumulated over sort of, however long you've been in business. Be specific about it, go through a process of working out exactly what it is that you need to have on SharePoint and cull the rest. Okay, so Metadata, great word. What does it mean? Metadata, defined by Merriam-Webster dictionary, is data that provides information about other data. So, for example, Word documents already have metadata that you're probably aware of. If you open up any Word document, you can see the word count in the bottom left. That's effectively metadata. It's not the data itself. That's the text and the content in the Word document. The metadata is data about the Word document that might be useful to know. So let's take a look at a practical example of adding custom metadata specifically within a document library within SharePoint. So let me bring up my document library. It's over here. Here's one I created earlier. So this has got a handful of documents in it, all related to IT and cybersecurity. These were all generated by Copilot. So to be clear, they're not our actual policies and procedures. I just asked it to create some sort of demo data for me. But you can see within here, we've got an add column button just over here. This really should be labeled add metadata, as that's what we're doing, but SharePoint call it columns. So I'm going to go ahead and click it, and we get some options for what type of metadata column we want to add. So I'm going to add in a person and step through this. And so I'm not actually adding a person here. I'm adding the column that's holding the data of type that's a person. So I'm going to call this the document owner, as I think that would be useful to know. So we can see these documents were modified by me, but I'm going to add a new column that's a document owner. And you can see that the column has appeared in here. So we've created a space for our metadata to go into, but it's blank because we haven't updated it yet. So if we go into this acceptable use policy document, then we can scroll down and we've got document owner in here. So I can put myself in there as the document owner. And you can see now that that's appeared in the column there. So it's obvious now what that's saying is, whatever it means to you in your world, but in ours, that would be that I'm responsible for this document. It's mine to maintain and mine to manage and what have you. So what else could we add? Well, what about an expiry date on the document, a date that it needs to be reviewed by? So we can add a column in. We can say date and time and run through the same process here. And I'm going to call it something slightly weird, expirational date. You'll see why in a bit. I know that's not a real word. And we can see our column gets created there, expirational date. So I'm going to add a date in for my document. You can see the field in here, and I'm going to put in tomorrow's date. So now this document expires tomorrow. It's due to be reviewed tomorrow, basically, is what we're saying here. So that's great. We know when we need to do that. That's brilliant. Can we get a reminder about that? So yes, we can. We can click in here with the document selected, go to automate and flows. Give it a moment to load up here. Here we go, and I want to set a reminder, and you can see it's already populated with my date field because it knows that a reminder is keyed on a date, and it's got the one that I added in, the expirational date. One of the reasons I chose that weird word. So it's going to run through this and do some checks that I've got things set up to do that. It's using Flow, and yes, I can get an email reminder 1 day before this document is due to be reviewed, and I'll create that. And what that would actually do, if you could see it now, would be it's due tomorrow, but it will send me an email right now. It will literally appear in my mailbox now. By default, that goes to me as I created the flow. If I wanted it to go to a different person, perhaps I've set a different person as document owner, it is possible to do that. I just need to go in and edit that flow. It's a bit beyond what we've got time to look at today, but obviously you could combine the metadata in that way. So you can also embed this custom metadata that we created within the document itself. So if I open this acceptable use policy, Just bring that over onto the screen here. So again, this is just created by Copilot, so there's nothing sort of too crazy in here. And we wanted review date in there. Then I can come in and I can say insert word. There we go. Quick parts, document property, and document owner, which was the first one that we added. So it's pulled that from the metadata of the document where it sits in the library, and I can do exactly the same with the date that we created. So again, expirational date, not a real word, just proving that it is pulling it through in there. So as you can see, it lifts the value straight there from the columns that we created in the library, and it sort of keeps them synced. It's not quite the right word to say synced, but it does sort of keep them there. So it's pretty obvious that sort of knowing who the document owner is and when the document needs to be reviewed and having that metadata visible within the document itself is pretty useful. But all this has other uses and other implications. So in this sort of brave new AI-powered world that we're sort of rapidly heading into, if you have your document metadata sorted out, then your AI tools and agents can do much more with it. So, for example, if you have data classified as internalize only, then it's going to respect that. You need a few bits and bobs around it, but it's not going to transcend it to a third party by email. The problem has been it's an awful lot of work to do to add useful metadata to your documents and to set up those rules around it, which is why few companies do it. But those that have done it are now at an advantage in this sort of race for AI. So if you haven't done that, how can you catch up? And the answer is sort of staring you in the face. You can get AI to add metadata to the documents for you. So to help with that, Microsoft recently released something called the Copilot Knowledge Agent. And you need to enable it within SharePoint. When you do that, what you see is this floating icon on the bottom right. And when you click on it, when you're within a document library, let's just unselect that, then you get the option organize this library. And when we click on that, it gives you some options for organizing the data. And what that really means is adding in those metadata, adding in those columns. And effectively, each of these options that it's sort of given us by default here are just Copilot prompts. So when we click on each of them, we can see what the prompt looks like. So I'm going to go with the create columns one, and it's saying based on the documents I have, create 3 columns to help me organize them. Provide a name for each column of no more than 2 words and use sentence casing. So it's describe what it wants the column to look like. So let's go with that and see what it comes up with. Give it a moment to sort of work through. Doesn't really take too long. There we go. So it hasn't actually sort of done any of this yet. This is just a preview of what it would do if I allowed it to carry on. So it's suggested, based on the documents, that we have a policy owner and a review date and a policy purpose. Now, we sort of already did policy owner and policy review date before, but maybe policy purpose would be quite a nice sort of summary. And that's great. So I'm going to remove those, but I'm also going to say classify each document as either a policy or a procedure under a column called document type. Let's see what happens here. So it's run and added that into the policy purpose that we kept and the document type, and you can see it's actually pulled out whether it's a policy or a procedure for us. That's not just looking at the name. The name is a bit of a clue, data protection policy. But for example, incident response plan, it's looked at the data to establish whether that's a procedure. It's not just sort of taking it from the title. And if you're familiar with these types of documents, then you'll know that it's got them spot on as to whether they're sort of policies or procedures that need to be followed. So I'm going to save those changes because I'm happy with that, and I'm going to save them into a new view here. Give that a moment. Here we go. So you can see it says autofill in progress. This is where it is actually applying the metadata to the documents. This usually takes a few minutes to do. So while it's doing that, quick mention on how to share a document. If you've never seen that or done that within SharePoint, you use this little arrow here. And if we do that, and I just pop in, say, John, who's one of the guys at ProDrive. If I click send, it would send John an email. But usually for internal ones, you'd actually just want to not bother with putting in John at the top there. You just say, copy the link. If you want to type in an external person, then, for example, John, you may see this message, you can only share within your organization. So this is going back to the controls that we talked about at the beginning, that on this document library, and you don't know whether it's library or site or organization level set, but it is preventing me from sharing this document externally. So you can see the controls do work on that. You also have just here, these were the defaults that we saw on some of the slides earlier. Do you want to allow people to sort of make changes or not to the documents that you share, and what you want to appear as default? You can share entire document libraries, but it's something to be very careful about, because I've heard reports of people sharing sort of entire document libraries, effectively the whole company's data with an external third party, which is not really what you want to do. And that's why we recommend blocking external sharing for your internal data sites and creating a specific site for people to share from. So I just thought I'd mention that while we had a moment or two there. So you can see what's happened here is it's created the view, and it's added in this metadata. It's given us a sort of purpose, a summary of each document here. You can rename this view. It's by default, it uses the date, and it's populated the columns that we can see there. But we have some other agents in the Copilot, other options in the Copilot knowledge agent. So if we just come back here, we can say set up rules. So we could say when a new file is added, set its status to needs review. And again, when we click on these options, it's just given us a Copilot prompt. Copilot prompt at the bottom is not quite what I want, so I'm going to bung in another one that says set existing files to reviewed. And the interesting point here is it's realized we don't have a review status column in the library. So first it's going to create that column for us, and it's going to do that, populate it, and then it's going to pop up the window to create the rule for us. Now, I don't actually want to do that. I'm going to back out of that one right now, but just to indicate that the other options are in there that will help you. Let's cancel that one. That's fine. So some other options. If you select a file and then select the Copilot knowledge agent, you get some more options. You could ask it for a summary of the file. I quite like the get an audio overview, an audio summary of the file. And perhaps this one is useful if you consume information better in an audio format, or perhaps you haven't got time to read through a long document, but you've got a car journey that maybe you could play it sort of as you're driving. And what I really like, when this takes a few minutes or a few seconds to do this, with this particular one, once it's created the audio file, I'm sure it's going to let me do it. Yeah, you can switch to a podcast style. So fans of Notebook LM, if anyone's used that for sort of creating podcast style sort of summaries of documents, where it's two people talking to each other, that's really cool. So let's close that. The other element within SharePoint that's sort of worth a note, because it's used quite a lot, is the list. So if you've used SharePoint before to create an old list, and you'll be familiar with the concept of columns because it's sort of built around that, this metadata. This is a SharePoint list I've created. You can see my columns. I've got sort of title, description, contract value. The list is something you can use if a document isn't the base object. So a document library would hold documents, but a list you can just sort of hold other sort of slightly more abstract sort of notions. So this list is one I've built to hold details of various contracts. This is our managed stapler contract, not a real contract, just an example. And you can see that we've got columns here. We can add a new column if we wanted to. What's missing is the knowledge agent icon. So when you're looking at a list, you don't get that floating icon that you do with the knowledge agent. But you can do other similar things with lists as you can with document libraries. You can embed them into teams. You can look at it in all sorts of ways. So lists and document libraries are the sort of two big concepts here. Okay, so quick look at Copilot, because the basic SharePoint bits and pieces we've looked at today are covered by your M365 business license. I would always advise that sort of small companies go for business premium, as in my opinion, that comes with the minimum that you need to properly secure a Microsoft 365 tenant at the best sort of value. The Copilot knowledge agent bits that I've just demoed require a Copilot license. And if you haven't heard, Microsoft have released some new promotional bundles for companies with less than 300 staff. There's a promotional offer for the next few months where you can buy it for £14.50 a month, still a year's commitment, but much reduced from before. And also there are SKUs for Business Premium and Copilot Business, which is the new small business offering, bundles basically, which again will save you sort of even more money. And my understanding is that if you already have some of these licenses, you will be able to transfer on some of these new offers sort of very soon. So of course, if you haven't got started with Copilot yet, we've got some programs to help you do that. Here's an overview of where we can help with our discovery workshops and launch programs, through to more specific consultancy pieces. We've really got you covered. If any of this is of interest, or if you just want to find out if perhaps there's a better way to run your IT, do get in touch after the webinar with myself or Bruce Penson. My contact details will be on the slides, which will get sent out after the webinar along with a recording, and you'll have them from various emails. We'll also include some links to resources. And if you are a ProDrive client and you're on this call, then some of the guides will be on the ProDrive client app that you can access through there. So just a couple of things left. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedule today and joining us on this webinar. And I'm just going to check through the chat to see if we've got any questions that perhaps I can answer. So who can add metadata? We have one question here. Who can add metadata columns, and can you restrict this? Also, can you make certain metadata compulsory? Yes, you can on both counts. So yeah, you can restrict who you can add, and you can certainly make things compulsory. Obviously, loads of options you can do with it. I've just run through some of them very quickly today. If you do have any other further questions, do reach out. My contact details are there. Happy to answer any. Happy to help you. Thank you all once again for joining. Hope to see you on one of our webinars in the future, or perhaps at some of our in-person events. Do get in touch if you want to discuss anything you've seen today in more detail. That's all from me. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.